Hello friends, welcome back to our channel. Today I want to share a true story about a person who survived 438 days at sea on a small boat, eat fish, birds, and drink their own urine, rainwater, and bird's blood for survive. Salvador Alvarenga survived 438 days adrift in a small fishing boat. He had no food, no water, no hope for so long. That is longer than anyone in recorded history has survived at sea ever. On November 17, 2012, he and another friend named Ezequiel Cordoba departed together on their small fishing boat from the tiny fishing village of Casa Azul on the Mexican Pacific coast. They planned to only work for a 30-hour fishing shift, so their boat was pretty small and not at all equipped for the nightmare that would come. It was basically a canoe with no roof, or cabin was only 7 meters long and only had one small motor and a refrigerator for storing their fish. They knew that a storm was coming near the area, but fishermen in these parts of Mexico can earn enough money in a day to support themselves for an entire week. So they decided to take their chances and traveled 120 kilometers away from the coast to work at One Empire. The storm hit them and was threatening to sink their boats in a panic that the two men cut their fishing lines and dropped everything they catch and most of their gear overboard to make themselves more maneuverable. They were 6 hours away from the coast, so they traveled through the storm and the night in a desperate attempt to get back by 7. They were 24 kilometers from the coast, with mountains visible on the horizon. Their motor failed, leaving them stranded without paddles, oars, or sails. Strong wind pushed their boat towards the ocean. Thankfully, the radio worked. For a moment, they reported their position to their boss, who responded saying that he was coming, but the battery died, and they heard only silence afterwards. Imagine the frustration that they must have both felt in that moment as their radio died, cutting off contact with the outside world. They watched the nearby mountains vanish, while their boat drifted back into the vast ocean. They had no flare gun or any other way to signal for help other than by waving, so they knew that their chances of survival were going to be slim. They had no supplies left on board, so they were forced to cut. They had no flare gun or any other way to signal for help other than by waving, so they knew that their chances of survival were going to be slim. They had no supplies left on board. So they were forced to catch tiny fish or birds that landed on their boat with their bare hands for food. They grabbed plastic bottles that they found floating nearby them and used them to collect rainwater for drinking water. But during long periods of no rain, they were forced to mostly drink the blood of turtles that they caught with their hands or their own urine. Imagine going day after day, month after month in a tiny box with only one other person to talk to, and the only other ways to entertain yourselves being catching fish or napping. Ezequiel Cordoba got sick from eating raw food. Then he lost hope and jumped from a boat and he became suicide. Then Alvarenga was then all alone in the middle of nowhere, with no other human in sight. As far as the horizon could see, a tiny speck inside of the enormous Central Pacific, where he was somewhere at, is a very quiet part of the world. Ships rarely come through this area. But even still, he claims to have encountered one when he was alone. A cargo ship apparently passed right by him, and 4 men on board spotted him and waved, but they just kept moving past him and never even bothered to stop. Imagine how frustrated he would have been again. If you were lost for months, you were all alone, and you finally spotted rescue, but they just ignored you and kept on moving. 11 months in, and Alvarenga had traveled about 8,000 kilometers across the ocean in his tiny little boat. His clothes were shredded, and he only had a sweatshirt to protect himself against the sun. Finally, on the 30th January 2014, he spotted coconuts bobbing around his boat and birds landing around him. He knew that land was near, and after drifting some more, he discovered an island that appeared to be uninhabited. It took him half a day just to drift near the shore when he finally jumped out of his boat and left its safety for the first time in over a year. He swam ashore and discovered a house, and when he knocked, he made contact with the first other humans since he left his village in Mexico 438 days ago, and after traveling imagine starting in a tiny boat in Lisbon, Portugal, and traveling less than 1 mile per hour until you drifted across the land to Hiroshima, Japan. Alvarenga ended up washing ashore on the Ibon Atoll, which is the southern tip of the Marshall Islands and one of the most remote spots on the planet. Had he missed this spot, the next likely stop for him would have been the Philippines, nearly 5,000 more kilometers away. And since it took him 438 days to travel roughly 11,000 kilometers, it probably would have taken him about 240 more days to hit the Philippines. Salvador Alvarenga survived 438 days adrift in a small fishing boat. He had no food, no water, no hope for so long. That is longer than anyone in recorded history has survived at sea, ever. He went into the ocean November 17th, 2012, and came out January 30th, 2014. Alvarenga's parents, who had not been in contact with him for years, had feared he was dead long before he went missing, and they were overjoyed to discover he was still alive. His father said that he had prayed for his son while he was missing. His daughter, upon hearing that her father had been found, said that after he returned home, "The first thing I'll do is hug him and kiss him." They were very surprised and happy. After 11 days in a hospital, Alvarenga was deemed healthy enough to return to El Salvador. However, he was diagnosed with anemia, had trouble sleeping, and developed a fear of water. In 2015, he gave a series of interviews about his ordeal to the journalist Jonathan Franklin, who published his story as the book 438 Days, an extraordinary true story of survival at sea. Shortly after the release of Alvarenga's book, the family of Ezequiel Cordoba sued Alvarenga for $1 million, accusing him of cannibalizing their relative in order to survive, despite their pact that Cordoba would not be eaten after death. Alvarenga's lawyer has denied this accusation.
I didn't think I was going to die. I always thought I was going to make it out alive. I told myself I had to remain strong.
The castaway says he survived by eating fish and turtles he caught while his teenage companion, who he says refused to eat, died 4 weeks into the drift. Weeks turned into months, and his initial resolve, Alvarenga says, quickly started to fade.
Twice. I thought a couple of times about killing myself. I grabbed the knife. When food and water ran out, I got depressed, and I would grab the knife and contemplate killing myself.
Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more interesting and inspiring videos. If your support means a lot to us and motivates us to keep creating inspiring content, share your ideas with us. Keep smiling and keep learning. Take care of yourself. See you in next video.